Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Elias Grampas, and on behalf of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, where we'll be discussing more towards a circular economy, a circular society and industry, and how the EU can further close the loop. Prior to commencing, I would like to apologize on behalf of the European Parliament Intergroup Secretariat regarding some IT issues experienced, and hence the delay with regards to starting this event today. Specifically today, so we aim to highlight how circularity is a very crucial component of the European Green Deal, in particular as it aims to mitigate climate change and tackle CO2 emissions, but also stimulate the demand for circular products and solutions. So before we kick off, I would like to take the opportunity to thank hosting MEP Ms. Maria Spyraki, co-chair of the Intergroup, for taking the lead with regards to today's event, as well as European Aluminium for kindly supporting this webinar. Prior to passing the floor, I would like to also invite all participants to send us your questions by choosing the option entitled Send Questions to all panelists via the Q&As box of the platform. So please refrain from using the chat box, and if you are to send your questions, please avoid contacting panelists bilaterally. Within your message also, at the Q&As box, you can also indicate the speaker to whom your question is best addressed, so that we can facilitate a fruitful discussion to follow. So once again, thank you very much for your participation. And without further ado, Ms. Spyraki, you have the floor. Okay, I understand that there is an issue with Ms. Spyraki's connection at the moment. Perhaps we can proceed with the intervention of Ms. Mayer on behalf of the European Commission. So Ms. Mayer has joined the European Commission in 2001 and is currently working in this environment, where she's leading the team responsible for sustainable production, products and consumption, with the core activity of the team being to support the transition to a circular and green economy. So without further ado, Ms. Mayer, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon to all participants, and thank you very much for the organization of this session. I hope it will go smoothly. I'd like to thank MEP Spyraki for her invitation to the discussion. The challenges we face are known. We face climate change, we face huge race to natural resources. The use of natural resources has tripled since the 1970s and is expected to double again by 2060. And this has a huge impact on biodiversity. 90% of biodiversity loss and water stress is related to the extraction and processing of those raw materials, and 50% of the climate change is also related to this. So the findings of the international resource panels are extremely enlightening in that respect. We also see that waste is mounting. You know that each European citizen is producing every year about 500 kilos of municipal waste. And I'm just talking about municipal waste because if you take, for example, construction waste into account, this is even more. So the challenges are known, but the opportunities are also there. We want to build back better, to make sure that we can overcome the current sanitary, economic, and social crisis by being greener and more digital. And we also see opportunities by the fact that today the EU industry is using only 12% of recycled materials in its production processes. We are relying 88% of the time on virgin material. So there are big progress that we can do on this front. And this is why we have proposed, in the context of the European Green Deal, a circular economy action plan that was adopted back in March, together with the industrial strategy, to transform the way we produce, we consume, and we throw away, which is basically a linear model, which we need to transform into a circular model. In that respect, the Circular Economy Action Plan foresees 35 actions for a clean and competitive economy. It tackles all the barriers a circular economy by looking at the loop from production, products, sustainable consumption, waste management, and the transformation of waste into secondary raw materials. So we need to keep the value of products and resources in the economy as much as we can. The Circular Economy Action Plan that was proposed back in March is now under examination by the Council and also by the European Parliament. MEP Uitema is the rapporteur for this matter. We already count with the opinions from the Economic and Social Committee and with the Committee of the Regions. And I see that the rapporteur is with us today, which is really great. Let me focus now on the highlights on the Circular Economy Action Plan, which is on products. So the circular economy is associated with waste management, but we should look into the whole cycle, starting with products. And this is why the Commission introduces the possibility to have a new policy framework addressing all products placed on the EU market and supporting more sustainable consumption and production patterns. We need to cut waste and we need to promote better design. In that context, we plan to table two legislative proposals to the Parliament and to the Council next year. First of all, to empower consumers in the green transitions and to make sure that the green claims which are made on products are substantiated through the environmental footprint methods. We are also looking at another legislative proposal that would come at the end of the year to revise the Eco-Design Directive. Why? Because the Eco-Design Directive looks at energy-related products only, which is already a lot, but still not all products are encompassed by eco-design. And also because the Eco-Design Directive looks mostly to energy efficiency. Again, that's a lot, but there are more sustainable principles to take into account. So we will be launching the consultation process early next year to revise the Eco-Design Directive. The great advantage of the Eco-Design Directive is that you can forbid the placing on the market, the EU market, which are not compliant with a certain level of requirements. So this ensures a fairer competition between companies who invest in developing green products and which are not doing this investment. So we would like to reinforce the requirements to make sure that we fight the fact that products break down too quickly, cannot be easily reused, repaired, or recycled, or because some are made for single use only. We would also like to incentivize the product as a service business models. Citizens do not necessarily need to own a product. What matters most is the function and the services, and we see promising avenues in this field. We also see that products are being destructed, so durable products are being destroyed, and so a number of practices that can be looked at in that context. The European Commission also focuses on key product value chains, electronics and ICT, batteries and vehicles, packaging, plastics, textiles, construction, and buildings. We see that these sectors are can really make further improvement, and that circularity can be delivered in that context. I think that today we will also address the role of stakeholders in the transition to a circular economy. And on this, I would like to flag that together with the Economic and Social Committee, we have set up a platform for stakeholders to come post their practices, learn about the circular economy, and also have a number of exchanges. So it's becoming more and more interactive. So if regions, industries, SMEs, universities are interested in jumping into the circular economy and need help to do that, the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform is there to help. It's easy. We need to Google European Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform and you will find us. Something which is also extremely important is that there are 24 large organizations specialized in circular economy that are on this platform, and they will promote efforts in Brussels, but more importantly in the cities and in the regions of Europe. With this, I will stop for this introduction to circular economy and back the floor to Ms. Spyraki. I saw that you were able to join. Thanks again for your invitation.
Thank you for coming with us and giving us this so important introduction, providing us with much more information. And I can underline the European Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform in order to facilitate the all relevant stakeholders for having further information on the topic of circular economy. And by saying this, I will come back to the webinar by saying that once again, I'm very sorry for the delay and excuse all of us for the delay. It was due to a technical problem in the Parliament. And I would like to start with this. Materials touch every aspect and moment of our lives. Today, we extract, produce, process, and dispose of more material than ever before. Specifically, over 65 billion tons of raw materials entered the chain of production in 2010, and now for 2020, that number is expected to increase to 82 billion tons. It is estimated that each year the manufacturing of products in OECD countries consumes over 21 billion tons of materials that aren't physically used in the products themselves. According to the MacArthur Foundation, only 10% of the raw materials extracted worldwide re-entered the economic system by recycling in 2015. However, as we all can understand, materials are also the enablers of sustainability and are the natural integrators in a way if used in a resource-efficient way. In Europe, material recycling and waste-based energy recovery capture only 5% of the original raw material value. Analysis has also found significant structural waste in sectors that many would consider mature and optimized. For example, 31% of food is wasted along the value chain. During the latest year, strong environmental concerns worldwide have promoted transition to a cleaner and sustainable environment where renewable energy and circular economy are the forefront of our agenda. Sustainable and co-designed methodology, energy and material measures, reduce, reuse, recycle strategies, business model innovation and industrial symbiosis are promoted. The realization of the circular economy, according to my opinion, needs some kind of actions. Allow me to name them as preconditions in this regard. First, it is the behavioral changes by consumers who need to embrace different lifestyles and consumption modes. And second, but not least, is the regulatory changes involving the introduction of public incentives and proper regulatory framework to address end-of-life products and secondary raw material. In that direction, I would like just to add some issues concerning the new action plan on circular economy, which paves a promising road towards circular value chains and the mainstreaming of the renewable, regenerative and recyclable resources. Circular Economy Action Plan number 2 has also recently restructured to Fit for Resilience. The Circular Economy Action Plan has initially introduced the same day which WHO officially announced that we are in a status of pandemic. COVID-19 is a global pandemic, so we need some kind of update in this regard in the action plan. However, the action plan shows many promising elements like the mandatory recycled content in centered products such as packaging and automotive, the mandatory green public procurement rules, the recycling targets on industrial and commercial waste, the binding rules on eco-design and appropriate labeling. I would like just to say that labels assist consumers to identify and to trust the quality of products, as well as ensures innovation sustainability. And of course, the data reliability is of paramount importance because it will assist in measuring the EU member states' recycling performance. It is of paramount importance to have specific and reliable data in terms of recycling performance for every and each member state. Therefore, a common reporting methodology should be proposed, according to my opinion, which enable national data to be communicated in a uniform, complete format. In addition to circular economy, I would like to focus on bioeconomy, which is share a vision for a future of the European industry entirely based on organic matter. European financial instruments and national governments support such kind of technological development with subsidies and policies stimulating R&D. While circular economy is described by Ellen MacArthur Foundation as a restorative and regenerative model where nothing is lost and everything feeds a new cycle, the bioeconomy and circular economy share some kind of this target, a more sustainable and resource-efficient world with a low carbon footprint. Both the circular economy and the bioeconomy avoid using additional fossil carbon to contribute to climate targets. Now we are here to the aluminium industry, which is a key player, not only in the material sector, but also in terms of best practices in circular economy. And I would like to underline that circularity will lead to keep the aluminium production both economically and also environmentally beneficial. The fact that 75% of all aluminium overproduced is still in use lets it score over the other materials in the circular economy. Moreover, increased recycling will also be key, as the production of aluminium from scrap takes only 5% of the energy required to smelt aluminium. The aluminium industry must, of course, invest in upscaling carbon add-on replacement technology to reduce emissions from electrolytic cells. Leading international automobile manufacturers have already set themselves to 2040-2050 as a deadline of turn fully carbon neutral. Similar commitments have also been seen in the packaging industry, and it is important user of aluminium, the packaging industry. But for the transition to be successful, society must understand the impacts of their products. To reach that understanding, we need a robust methodology of evaluating products across their whole life cycle. The production and the environmental footprint methodology is an opportunity to achieve that, but only if it is well designed. So, the circular economy provides an opportunity to boost Europe's competitiveness by using its resources more efficiently, reinvesting business model, and creating new opportunities for jobs and growth. The current crisis makes the circular economy more relevant than ever, as it holds a significant number of economically attractive answers. In any case, the innovation and technological innovation is not the only driver, but it is a key enabler. Tremendous opportunities could be created by adopting circular economy principles for industrial renewals, regeneration, and innovation. I would like to conclude with this. The Ellen MacArthur, Sun, and McKinsey have identified that by adopting circular economy principle, Europe can take advantage of the implementing technology revolution to create a net benefit of 1.8 trillion by 2030, or 0.9 trillion more than in the current linear development path. Once again, thank you very much for your attention. And once again, excuse me for the delay and the inconvenience before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Spyraki, for providing the opening remarks to today's discussion, moreover setting the scene with regards to the interventions to follow. So moving ahead, it's with great pleasure to welcome Ms. Aten to the discussion. Ms. Catherine Aten is Vice Chair of the Sustainability Committee at European Aluminium. Moreover, she is also Vice President of Group Sustainability at Constellium, which is in charge of driving and executing the company-wide sustainability strategy. Last but not least, Ms. Aten is also Vice President for Public Affairs for Europe at Constellium, while having over 25 years of experience in corporate strategy, marketing, sales, and sustainability. Ms. Aten, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the organization. Thank you, Mr. Grampas. Thank you, Mrs. Spyraki, for your forwards on the aluminum industry. It is my pleasure to introduce you with the circular, how aluminum can really contribute to the circular economy. So good afternoon, everyone. I will start sharing my screen. And let me go to my slides. I hope you can see my slides. So we'll start. So the topic of my speaking today is about achieving the full circular potential of aluminium. The reality is that we've been a circular industry for quite some time already. It's kind of intrinsic to the aluminium industry. Today, in 2020, 36% of the demand for aluminium in Europe is actually out of recycled material. So we're already very much engaged into the circular economy. And the purpose here is actually to move forward and to actually continue to make really improvements and over the next decades, also in view of the 1.5 degree pathway and the net zero impact. So I will start with a very small snapshot of who we are. European Aluminium is an industry association that gathers more than 80 members, more than 600 plants, 1 million jobs, direct and indirect, across the whole value chain. We represent the whole value chain from production to transformation of the aluminium. The main markets, and that's important because it's a big part of the circular economy, is how those different markets actually go into being more circular with the aluminium material. So the key distinct markets that we service, the aluminum industry, is clearly the mobility, so transportation part, the packaging, the building industry, and also some niche markets on the consumer durables and the high-tech engineering. I will talk later about the recycling part, but the aluminum industry in Europe is actually quite a substantial part of the worldwide aluminum production, more than 16%. Aluminium has very intrinsic properties that make it very fit for circularity. Recyclability. So this is really the key features. The most feature is actually you can recycle aluminium multiple times, and it's actually not only recyclable, but it's actually recycled. So we are achieving incredible rates already today in terms of end-of-life recycling of aluminium in the automotive sector, in the building sector, with more than 90% recycling at the end of the life of the material. And in the case of cans, which rely also on everyone's collection effort, but also systems that are put in place by various states, we already reach a quite impressive number of 75%. Another part of the sustainability, I would say, credential of aluminium relates to durability, are the product stays, and actually 75% of aluminium that is today is still being used, that has been produced is still being used today. So it's quite a substantial amount of aluminium still there because it's durable, and you can see this with the lifespan very large for construction, but also for transportation, 15 years on average, and in the building industry, it's at least 50 years. And the reason why recycling is kind of intrinsic to the aluminium is that aluminium has value. Aluminium has stored somehow the energy that has been needed to produce it, and therefore, when you recycle aluminium, you save 95% of the energy that you needed to produce primary metal from the beginning. So this makes this material, because it's durable, because it can be used multiple times, what we call a permanent material. You can recycle many times, and even if you think of the beverage can, where the lifespan of a beverage can is quite short, a couple of months. Obviously, it's not there to stay; it's there to be consumed. But still, if well sorted, if well recycled, you can bring it back again into the system multiple times, and therefore you don't need to produce again primary metal. I would like to highlight what European Aluminium has been advocating, which is really an action plan for first circularity by 2030 and even beyond by 2050, with the objective of really maximizing the use of post-consumer aluminium. The whole plan is about avoiding the increased import of primary aluminium, which has been actually very instrumental to the growth of demand in Europe so far. So we've been actually growing. Demand for aluminium has been growing also on the basis of increased imports from primary aluminium outside of Europe. And we would like this trend to stop. The idea is that we believe that this trend can be stopped if instead of growing out of imported aluminium, we grow out of recycled aluminium, recycling happening inside Europe. And this would contribute to significant CO2 savings. In the case of 2050, would be up to 46% instead of relying on imports of aluminium. And as Mrs. Mayer was mentioning, this is not only about CO2, this is also saving resources. So we would actually avoid using virgin material and avoid using bauxite and avoid all the potential impacts that are also happening on the beginning of the value chain if we use virgin material. And on top of that, because we would maintain a certain level of imports and not increase the imports, we would increase the independence of Europe on its raw material sourcing. But for that, there is a certain amount of conditions, and I will come back to that. A bit later. we definitely need a fair market, and we definitely need the right policy conditions to be able to achieve this target. Just a couple of information on how this actually plan, how it's reflected into the numbers. If you look at the graph on this slide, you see, if I take the global graph, you see, so you see an increase. You can see that we can see that aluminium will continue to increase on the very specific properties, including typically lightweighting for the automotive part, the other durability of the material. So we see an increase. So that's number one, big increase of demand. How can we support how this demand can be supported? On the bottom of the graph, you see the European primary production. So I would say number one message is ideally we would like this primary production to continue and even potentially to increase a little bit, which has not been the case historically. It's actually been declining. Second, we would like the recycling part actually to take that space in terms of the increase of the demand and to really expand, going from 36% today of the global demand to 49%. So half of basically in 2050, half of the demand for aluminium would be serviced by post-consumer recycled aluminium. And the primary, which would leave the primary imports, the imports of primary aluminium, stable. So that's really a scenario that where we would see really using the full potential of aluminium for the circular economy. And so what we see that today we were already quite good in terms of economy for aluminium. What we want is to go from good to very good to extremely good. And therefore, there are a couple of key things that they need to happen in order for this, to expand to 50% of the. And that would mean overall, I would say, in the various markets, whether this is cars, whether this is packaging, or this is building, which are really the three main markets that we service, it's a lot about sorting technologies and better sorting. So it's dismantling, potentially intelligent dismantling when it comes to vehicles, separate collections of various product types when it's on-site demolition site. And it's about how you better collect and sort the packaging when it's actually been collected. So that's very important one, number one. And another one, which is more, I would say, for aluminum cans, and to a certain extent also in cars, is the fact that we actually continue to improve collection. That's very important. And therefore having the right recovery systems to support this collection. So it's about extended product responsibility systems, but it's also about potentially deposit systems, as long as it's fair and it's transparent for all materials. When it comes to cars, it's about making sure that cars are actually recycled in Europe. Today, we have a lot of outflow of cars at the end of their life that actually leave Europe, and therefore the recycling doesn't happen in Europe, and it's not benefiting to Europe. And with that, we would need also better statistics to actually account for that. So it's a lot about separation, sorting, but also closer loop. So ideally, a door or a hang-on part of a car would end up as a hang-on part of a car, an extruded product as an extruded product. And it's also about investment, because all of this will require additional investment. So that's about what I wanted to say about how we see that. I have another. As a conclusion, I would say that we have this target of 50% recycling as part of the demand for aluminium in 2050. Is something we believe can be achieved. This would save almost 40 million tons of CO2, which is 46% less than if we don't achieve that, if we continue on the current trend, which is basically to fuel a portion of the demand through imports of more carbon-intensive primary material. And But this will not just come by magic. So there are certain policies that need to be, so I would say a legislative framework that needs to be developed. And we welcome a lot the Green Deal for this and all the various streams of work that are being worked out, including the circular economy part, which is clearly gives us a lot of hope in terms of the kind of legislation state by state that will be implemented to foster all the innovation, the sorting, and the collection system that will need to be reinforced to achieve that. This is also going to be needing investment, and therefore we would also we have to acknowledge that a lot of this investment, any incentive for this investment will be for sure very much welcome. I think that's it. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I will be following the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aten. Moving on with today's agenda, I would like to provide the floor to Mr. Bystrom, who is working within the European Investment Bank as a lead engineer in the Urban Development Division within the Projects Directorate, where he carries out inter alia due diligence and monitoring of solid waste, circular economy, but also urban development projects. Mr. Bystrom, I think it's an intervention we're all very much looking forward.
Thank you very much. So first of all, a good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in this timely and very relevant seminar. I would also, first of all, I hope you see the presentation, right? Yeah, no one is contradicting that. Then, thanks to Catherine for a very good kind of pass on to this presentation. She ended by saying that investments will be needed. So from that point of view, I'm happy then to introduce the place where I work, the European Investment Bank. It's lending arm, therefore the EU bank. But we are also the climate bank. We have committed to, by end of this year, be fully Paris aligned in our lending and activities. And we have committed to, by 2025, dedicate 50% of our financing to climate action and to environmental sustainability. And part of the latter is, of course, circular economy. It's one of the 4 objectives under the taxonomy definition of environmental sustainability. So from that point of view, but also considering that in the Commission there has been a very strong focus on the circular economy since 2014-15. The first circular economy package was presented, as we know, 2015. And since then, the EIB, as an EU policy-driven bank, have looked at and discussed and thought about how can we support the circular transition. And that is what I will focus my 10 minutes on. As a bank, we are, of course, I don't know if I'm now, we are, of course, offering lending financing to the circular economy. We are trying to do that in different ways. We have instruments for the larger corporate projects, investment loans. We have instruments that we can use for smaller projects through banks, intermediary loans. We are offering framework loans, for example, to municipalities, to cities, to finance their investment programs, possibly under thematic framework approaches. So we have a wide range of instruments that can match the different risk profiles, the different sizes of projects and of promoters. We also have impact financing, where we try to support projects and promoters that try to commercialize, scale up innovative, transformative ideas, even when they are at the pre-revenue stage. So we try to cover through our instruments a full range of needs, with an exception maybe of the very, very early, the very first stages. We are also trying to support the blending of our financing with other sources of financing, grants, for example, and we benefit from guarantees and other instruments from the Commission that enable us to take risk, like I said, in certain instruments. But in addition to offer financing, we have recognized that the circular economy is a new and a bit fuzzy concept, and for many promoters, for many other stakeholders, there has been a need, as it has been for the EIB staff, to a bit better understand what this is all about, the circular economy, and for project promoters, how to define, how to structure sound and also bankable circular economy projects. So from that point of view, we have quite a few advisory initiatives that can be put at the disposal of project promoters, of other stakeholders that can benefit a bit from seeing how would a bank and an institution like EIB look at, and what expectations do we have with regard to circular economy projects. We've also been involved in many different networks, both to learn and to hear what others are doing, but also to share our experience, our work. And we have been involved in knowledge sharing, also because we can see and we have seen that there is a need to really see what are the needs and the rationale for going about this circular transition, how can it be done, what are the benefits of doing this, and also what are the risks of staying in a more linear approach. We have had a particular focus on cities, in that we know and see and have in, for example, the Urban Agenda Circular Economy Partnership, where we worked for a number of years now, that cities have the potential to be both the cradle of the ecosystems where circular developments can take place, where SMEs and other companies can find the material flows, the waste flow, the resource flows, etc., to develop their circular business models and ideas. But in cities, there are also local authorities, there are administrations that can catalyze the circular developments through regulation, through incentives, by bringing stakeholders together, by mapping out the vision and the circular development roadmap and strategy, etc. And for that purpose, we have prepared a number of guides and steps, and I will introduce those a bit later, a bit further. We also have other knowledge sharing information, and I will go a bit more in detail as to what we have on that. The guide that we have prepared has tried to define the circular economy. We had, in the early years where we looked at this and how EIB can support the transition, seen a need to define the circular economy, and we have done that in various iterations. In the latest version, our guide that you find on our web and address to later, there is a definition in 4 different categories of circularity and 14 different subcategories. And there is also an annex that introduces in more detail with various kind of for example, product types that can be linked to these categories, with the view to really, from EIB point of view, but also based on what has been done in the work that DGRTD has led, and EIB, EBRD and others have contributed to the circular economy categorization report, been a very good definition that now serves a bit as a basis for the taxonomy work that has started for the circular economy. The guide also introduced a list of projects that the EIB has done, quite a lot of other information, references, etc. So it's a good source for information for those that want to know, how do we define this, what do we think about the reasons for and the benefits of this circular transition. For cities, we have prepared a similar guide, but focus on how can a linear city go about becoming more circular through 15 different steps, going from monitoring, planning to acting, and then mobilizing monitoring. And I will not go into detail, but it's available again on our website, and it provides good ideas for and guidance for the decision makers, the planners in a city on how to start this transition. In this partnership I referred to, we realized that providing finance, accessing finance for SME, for cities, the utilities, the cities proper, is a challenge and a bit of an obstacle. And therefore, together with the European Investment Advisory Hub, we have prepared the Circular City Funding Guide, a web resource or a web tool that provide guidance for fund seekers, for fund providers, but also for the different stakeholders in the city that could benefit from understanding what are the benefits, what are the rationale, the reasons for, and how is the circular transition possible for different kind of sectors, for different kind of circular strategies, etc. And there is also a LinkedIn group where you can follow a bit of the development. This guide was launched in the Cities Forum in Porto early this year and is being developed with new information relatively regularly. With regard to the financing, the EIB has provided financing for many years to economy projects of different kinds. We try to keep a bit of an stock of what we do in this field, and in the last 5 years we have financed almost 100 projects in 7 different sectors. And you can see that it ranges from industry and services, which would be then, for example, the aluminium sector, many other different kind of industry and services of different kind, including leasing and sharing services. Waste management, very traditional aspect, and maybe a kind of early stage aspect of the circular economy, where we finance separate collection of various waste streams, including aluminium, recycling facilities of different kinds. Agricultural bioeconomy has been referred to. There are many different opportunities to loop back organic bio waste streams into the economy, ensure that they are recycled, recovered. Water management as well offer many opportunities to reuse water, to loop it back to ensure that water is saved, that the energy is saved in the process as well. In mobility, urban development, energy, the share is quite small, but there has anyway been projects, mobility, I think, rolling stock, design purpose to ensure that they can be recovered, recycled to the extent possible. Urban development, there has been focus on repurposing old buildings, on promoting redevelopment and remediation of brownfields and contaminated sites. And in energy, energy recovery and turning waste streams into energy. So I think slide shows that it's a wide range of activities we support, and through them, as indicated before, not only through this lending, but also through various forms of advisory and to various efforts and means of knowledge sharing. And through this, I hope it's clear that the EIB is very willing to continue to support this circular transition. And we hope we have also shown that we are able to do it. We are also very happy to engage in a dialogue on this. And as I said, we have a dedicated circular page on our website, and you find the address here. And you can also reach a dedicated circular economy email inbox through this address. So with this, I say thank you very much. Thanks for the attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bergström, for your intervention, also for highlighting the key role that the IB plays with reference to circular economy. Our next speaker is Mr. Mangal, Mr. Philippe Mangal, who is also the Executive Director of the Bio-Based Industries Joint Undertaking in 2015, with his mission being to further consolidate the role and responsibilities of BBIA-JU. So all in all, Mr. Mangal has more than 30 years of professional experience as CEO, Managing Director, R&D Director, but also Senior Consultant in food ingredients, bioenergy, engineering, and life sciences industries. So thank you very much, Mr. Bengal, for joining us today. The floor is yours. Just prior to providing you that, I would like to invite our audience to send us their questions via the Q&A box as we're progressing with today's discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to MEP Spyraki for hosting this session today. Thank you for inviting me. I don't know if you see my presentation currently. I don't have any signal. Can you see my presentation?
We do, just not on full screen mode.
I will put in full screen. Now it's much better, probably.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So my presentation today is about the contribution of the European bioeconomy towards a circular society and industry, and the specific role of the BBIJU, the Bio-Based Industry Joint Undertaking. So I could simply consider that the bioeconomy is circular by nature because it is based on the best system ever to capture CO2 and to produce biomass via the photosynthesis. I could repeat again that the bioeconomy is already a reality because after the boom of the Industrial Revolution, we have to move to the post-petroleum era. And it should be accelerated by the fact it is today cheaper to produce electricity with wind turbine and photovoltaic panel as compared to gas turbine and nuclear power plants. Cost of electricity storage and requested infrastructure is also decreasing much faster than expected 10 years ago. So more and more, we will be living off the land again to produce all types of goods where carbon is absolutely needed. I mean food and feed, of course, but also bio-based fibers, materials, and in some cases to ensure the transition fuel and bioenergy. Today, overall 90% of oil and gas, one way or the other, is burned. And 10% remaining is used to produce chemicals and materials. In bioeconomy, cellulose produced by nature is the most abundant biopolymer on Earth. Around 100 billion tons of cellulose are synthesized annually by nature as the result of the photosynthesis. It is by far more than the global crude oil production, fluctuating between 4 and 5 billion tons. But that's not enough. The European bioeconomy has to be deployed and must grow in a sustainable and circular manner. You can see on this slide the bio-based industry value chain in 3 segments, with in green on the right side of the slide the end use by industry and consumer. Those value chains represent in Europe today 750 trillion euro turnover and 3.6 million jobs, with a double-digit growth for some sub-segments of this value chain. But this value chain is faced with challenges and risk at different levels, which makes that it is still very fragmented. There are challenges at risk at feedstock supply level in terms of qualitatively speaking, quantitatively speaking. The sustainable sourcing of the biomass is, of course, essential as well. And more we have to consider the impact of biodiversity. The fragmented supply chain is still a problem because where the biomass is produced is not necessarily where it is transformed, at least today. Now, and there is not enough infrastructure to move the biomass throughout the value chain. The biorefineries where the biomass will be transformed into end product represent very heavy investment, and there is still a lot of technologies at risk. Product development is also at risk because in most cases it's not just to produce the fossil-based equivalent. Consumer awareness is still an issue with a lot of confusion which is still existing. And finally, regulation and product specification remain an issue in lots of cases. So the sector really needs supportive, coherent, and stable regulatory framework, but it also needs a strong support for research and innovation activity. And that is why the BBI-JU was part of the bioeconomy strategy approved in 2012. The BBI-JU is a public-private partnership between the European Commission, 3 DGs, DG RTD, DG Agri, and DG Grow, and the Bio-Based Industry Consortium, BIC, representing the private sector. The overall budget of the BBI-JU is 3.7 billion euro, overall 25% coming from the European Commission and 75% coming from the private sector. And this budget is used to support a research and innovation program to develop the bio-based industries in Europe. The aim is at 3 levels. First, it's about de-risking investment. De-risking investment to trigger investment, to keep investment in Europe, but also to attract investment from outside Europe. The second aim is about reaching the critical mass, because not several companies or several regions can achieve this challenge. And what is expected is the mobilizing effect of all actors around the value chain. The third aim is to organize and structure the value chain. The objective of the BBI-JU was to develop a sustainable and competitive bio-based industry in Europe, but this based on advanced biorefineries that will source their biomass in a sustainable manner. How is it achieved? It is achieved by implementing the strategic innovation and research agenda developed by the industry and approved by the European Commission. And the intervention is at 3 levels. It's first about demonstrating technologies to fill the gap in existing value chain, to demonstrate business case thanks to demonstration plans, but it's also the industrial and commercial deployment by funding flagship biorefineries that must be the first of the kind in Europe. So in this manner, we cover all the different level of technology readiness, the different level of maturity up to the commercial and industrial deployment. The expected impact when it was established was huge, and it was, in a certain way, already a first flavor of the Green Deal. The ambition is to replace 25% of oil-based chemicals by 2030 as compared to 2014 and have 10 times more bio-based material. It's also about creating a job. It is expected to create 700,000 of jobs by 2030, in particular in rural and coastal area, but also to diversify and grow farmers' revenues, to reduce the European dependency on the import of strategic raw material, protein in particular, where Europe still depends, imports 70% of their protein needs, but it's also about phosphorus and potassium, where the decrease of the import is expected to be 25%. And a consequence of all this is to reduce the greenhouse gas emission by 50% by 2030. Today in the portfolio, we have more than 100 projects for more than 700 million euro of funding. This includes more than 900 beneficiaries present in 37 countries. And yes, that's true that this initiative is an industry-driven initiative, but the SMEs play a very important role there. They represent 35% of our beneficiaries, and universities and research centers also represent overall 1/3 of the beneficiaries. Sorry for this map, but that's a very, very important one because that's a key achievement of the sustainable and circular deployment of the bio-based industry. These are the flagship biorefineries we have currently in the portfolio, and you can see they are very well spread around Europe from north to south, west and east, with very different business model, but always a sustainable and a circular business model. A very important aspect of those flagship, for those 11 flagship we have currently, they represent already the creation of 3,500 direct jobs, and it is expected to generate 10,000 indirect one. And if we look at the leverage effect of the intervention of the BBI, those flagship overall received 228 million euro of grant from BBI, but it triggers 1.3 billion of private investment. And considering that those flagship biorefineries were selected for their high potential of replicability, we can see that the socio-economic impact is huge as well. So if we now look at the whole portfolio of the BBI and the type of feedstock which is used, because again, sustainable sourcing of the feedstock is essential. For projects using agriculture-based feedstock, 90% of the project use feedstock only from waste and byproduct, and 7% use crop grown on marginal land. Regarding the forest-based feedstock, there 96% of the project use forest-based feedstock. They use residues, cellulose, pulp, and paper industry side stream, and only 4% cut wood exclusively from sustainably managed forest. And regarding the blue side of the bioeconomy, 100% of the aquatic feedstock used for project are either algae or byproducts from fish and seafood industry, which definitely helps make the fishing industry more circular. And this last slide is to conclude. Sorry, it's a bit of statistics, but that's an analysis again of the portfolio and the environmental impact contribution to the project. And you can see on top of the slide that 84% of the project will have a direct contribution on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, 75% of them waste reduction, reuse, recycling, so the circular bioeconomy contribution, and half of them will contribute to reduce energy consumption. And you can see the rest of the list. Important to point out is that where you can see, for example, 75% of positive contribution, it doesn't mean that there is a negative contribution from the rest of the portfolio. If it was the case, those projects would have never been selected for funding. So I'm now reaching the end of my presentation. Currently, BBI-JU is evaluating its last call for proposal under Horizon 2020, and we are preparing the transition towards the successor of the BBI, which has a name. It is CBE, Circular Bio-Based Europe. So Circular Bio-Based Europe will be deployed under Horizon Europe, and will reinforce the focus on biodiversity contribution, the safeguard of ecosystem, the reduction of greenhouse gas emission, together with an improvement of the primary sector participation and contribution to value chain. But it's still to be approved, and it will enter into force next year. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mangal, for highlighting the mission of BBI-AIDS-EU, but also the key added value of your projects. Moving ahead with today's agenda, it's with pleasure to introduce Mr. Stelpstra. Mr. Stelpstra is a member of the Committee of the Regions Commissions for Economic Policy, ECON, but also Environment, Climate Change and Energy, ENVI, for the group of ECR. Additionally, Mr. Stelpstra is also the rapporteur for the the European Committee of the Regions for the opinion on the Circular Economy Action Plan. So, Mr. Stelpstra, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present some highlights from the opinion which is adopted by the Committee of Regions on the Circular Economy Action Plan. And let me start with some general remarks. The Intergroup of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development is an important partner for the Committee of the Regions that participates to its advisory group. Local and regional authorities know very well the importance of the EU policies followed by the intergroup and their practical impacts in our communities. And as a rapporteur on circular economy of the Committee of the Regions, I would be happy to cooperate with the working group on circular economy of the intergroup. My second general remark is circular economy is one of the priorities of the Green Deal. And as Committee of the Regions, we have set up a working group, Green Deal Going Local, that aims at placing cities and regions at the core of the European Green Deal and ensure that both the EU's Sustainable Growth Strategy and the COVID-19 recovery plan translate into direct funding for cities and regions and tangible projects for every territory. We have collected local and best practices connected with the Green Deal that are available on our website, and we are preparing multiple opinions on the Green Deal and on its specific priorities. And as a member of the working group, I will have the opportunity to bring your inputs to my colleagues. Now about the Circular Economy Action Plan. The plan is very welcome from the Commission. It will help to shape a pathway towards a more resilient and low carbon economy recovery from the devastating consequences of the linear economy. And with this action plan, Europe can show a real European approach in setting targets and at the same time make use of local and regional knowledge with respect to differences between countries. And let me highlight some points for you from that opinion. To achieve the goals we want, we need targets on several subjects. And one overall target should be that we relate circular economy to the reduction of CO2. And in opinion, I called on the European Commission to accompany every key action with an estimated result and an ambitious timescale. I believe there is a need to implement at the EU level a total resource and reduction target in order to succeed in decoupling growth and resource use. To reach these targets, cooperation is needed between countries and regions. And the European Commission should actively facilitate and stimulate these cooperations. They should also support member states and regions by providing the necessary funds. Linked to targets is innovation. Innovation will help us to set standards. And one of the recommendations in the opinion is that the reached innovation of today must be the standard within 5 years. When we can achieve it, we must do it. The extended producer responsibility is a crucial strategy to ensure proper business cases in which producers also look into safe and circular by design consequences. This will also help to prevent waste. Pricing of products is very important. To get a competitive playing field, we need fair prices which include the costs of pollution, waste, and emissions. Producers have an important role to play. They must develop products with as small a planetary footprint as possible, and as far as avoid using virgin fossil materials as raw materials in their production process. And as an important principle, it is also so that all materials should be designed in a way that they become either nutrients for the biosphere or new materials for the next cycle of use. Many resources labeled waste are available in Europe. And in order to reach a true circular economy, the mind shift needs to switch toward the paradigm there is no waste. Waste doesn't exist. What we call waste is a collection of resources. And COVID-19 has shown us how dependent we are on resources. So keep them, don't waste any waste. And the opinion urges the European Commission to set criteria whereby a substantial proportion of new products should be made of recycled materials, and recommends making this a part of the approach to create product value chains. And in order to reduce dependency and strengthen security of supply, the European Commission and the member states should orchestrate resource management, especially with regards to scarce and critical materials. And the developments towards an EU resource policy platform should be explored. And of course, the central part of my opinion is about local and regional governments. The new Commission's Circular Economy Action Plan takes a little note of their role. And that's regrettable, because I think local and regional governments do play an important role. They have abilities to and handle in different areas where circular economy comes close to the citizens. For example, the competences on handling waste, on water, on spatial planning and on building. There are many good practices visible on local and regional level. And local and regional governments can play also an important role in circular public procurement. And that's where I also call for green public procurement criteria and targets. And the opinion recommends developing a set of positive innovation targets and call on the European Commission to stretch these to become truly circular public procurement. And for a circular economy, to achieve a circular economy, scale is very important. Cooperation between various regions and cities needs to be developed at the European level in order to make it possible for regions and cities to use each other's infrastructure to, for instance, handle waste during the transition phase. This is the way how we must act in this recovery period. And circular economy requires a new way of consuming that radically changes the consumer's consumption habits. Raising awareness is essential, and local and regional governments play a major role in establishing this mind shift. But the support of the European Commission on projects at the local and regional level, which leads to tangible results, can be decisive. And we should pay attention, finally, to education and the development of skills, because of the possibility to benefit from the development of highly skilled jobs in the near future. But, ladies and gentlemen, what are our big challenges, and are there bottlenecks? Well, let me indicate some. It is important to acknowledge the fact that circumstances and progress are not homogeneous across the EU and within member states. And my opinion pays attention to this. There are front runners and there are laggards. And that's the reality. This is a big challenge. But let us use this reality as a great opportunity, an opportunity for cooperation. And another challenge is there is a risk that jobs in the circular economy, which will be relatively unskilled in the short time, after that become automated, and in the medium to long term will be lost through robotization. Therefore, regions with a big potential of relatively unskilled employment, partly due to low labor costs, should be the first to benefit from support for education and capacity building. This way, those regions can speed up the transfer to highly skilled jobs. And this process will stimulate technical and social innovation and support local and regional governments towards a diverse and resilient economy. And maybe one of the biggest risks and challenges will be skepticism and ignorance. And that's where we have a lot of work to do. We must convince our citizens, our customers, about the importance of this transition to a circular economy, and show them it's not only making the world better in an environmental way, but it is also the next step to more welfare. And we have to that a big responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stijpstra, for your key remarks. Now it's with pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Ulrich Leberle, who is also the Raw Materials Director within CEPI. CEPI is the Confederation of European Paper Industries, where Mr. Leberle holds this position. Prior to that, he also worked in the European Commission as well as the European Parliament, and as a consultant in a Brussels-based company specializing in EU public affairs. So, Mr. Leberle, without further ado, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to present in this in this session. Thanks to MEP Spyraki for the invitation. It's a great pleasure and honor. I had a technical problem, so may I ask you to flip the slides directly to page 4, the one with some key figures. And I'm pointing to a couple of ones later in more detail that are more connected to the theme of our session. But I think it's important, first of all, to also know that the pulp and paper industry in Europe is producing 1/4 of all production in the world, and that we are actually a net exporter of pulp and paper products. So 22% of the paper production is exported. So I think that is often a misconception about this, that we are importing a lot of forest and paper products into Europe, but actually this is exporting sector. And I think that is important to keep in mind, that what's special really is that there is a value creation from the forest in Europe to the waste management in the end, through paper production, pulp production, all the side streams in the biorefineries that have been mentioned before, and that is also a strong aspect of circularity, that we keep the value addition in Europe throughout that life cycle. The industry is investing. We have 2 times more investments than average manufacturing, and the CO2 per ton of product is halved over the last since 1990. If you flip it to the next one, please, we come a bit more in detail to these aspects of circularity and renewability, and that is one strong point. So Mrs. Emmanuelle Maire has already told in her introductory statement that only in European manufacturing, only 12% is based on secondary raw materials, and therefore there is a strong discussion about how to increase the recycled content of our products. Well, in paper, that is already more than half of raw material is based on recycling, what we call paper for recycling. So the paper that is collected from households, in the municipal waste, but also in the supermarkets, etc. That is more than half of our resource actually, and that is set to go further. But I would like to make the link to also the renewability and the bioeconomy, which is the other part of that story, because in that sense, paper is somehow best of both worlds. We have a very strong recycling rate and other features of circularity, but then there is the renewability of the resource. So that is shown with the fuels consumption that you see on that graph on the left. So we have today already 60% of the total energy consumption in the paper industry is based on renewables, and that has to do with the efficient use of side streams, and the basic raw material. That is of course when we look at virgin raw material. That is wood, and that is wood from Europe mostly. So CEPI area is that area where really from the countries where the paper industry is manufacturing. You need to add to that the orange box. So that makes that more than 90% of the wood used in that sector comes from Europe, and that contributes again to this value creation from the tree cutter in the forest management to the waste management when it's about revaluating the paper that you put in your paper bin. To the carbon cycle is our next slide, please. So here that is about a study that has been done to look at the total climate effect of the European forest and forest-based sector. So not only pulp and paper, but the whole wood ecosystem that we have in Europe. And we see that the net sink, so that is the total of what European forests sequester in terms of CO2 every year. So those 450 million tons CO2 equivalent. That is a number that is doubled if you count also the substitution effect through the use of the wood products. So and due to their renewability and their growth in the forest again. And compared to that, actually, you see that the emissions from the use of fossil fuels in the wood sector, including pulp and paper, is quite low. These are only 50 million tons CO2, and on the total, we have then 800 million tons that is stocked and reducing CO2 emissions throughout Europe, and that is 20% of all fossil emissions in the European Union. And today's policies only look quite strongly at the sink function of the forest, and with the risk that these are then offsetting emission reductions that don't take place in other sectors, but the substitution effect is not yet finding its way in the policy in this respect. Next slide, please. So we as I said, so on the virgin resources and the growing forests in Europe, we're making progress. On the recycling rate, we're also coming from a high level already, 4 times more than average in European manufacturing. But we want to close the gap still. There's still a lot to do, and so I'm just putting here a couple of initiatives to close those gaps, both on recycling. There is now a very strong focus on packaging that was also explained in forest in the product policies. With packaging is one focus. So we have design guidelines for the brand owners and for retailers that go towards fiber-based solutions to not only switch to fiber-based, but also how to take into account the recyclability of those products at the end of life. So that is a best-selling publication that gets a lot of interest. And the next step from that is a harmonized European testing to make sure we can test paper products on their recyclability to make sure can they be recycled again in the infrastructure in Europe, because that is also in paper industry. It's the same industry that recycles its products again, not counting on third parties that develop some solutions for our sector. No, that is coming back into the paper industry, and only this is counting towards the recycling. We also have then a specific focus on fiber-based packaging in a new initiative called Forever Green, and please use that one. There is a launch event just next week on 25th November, and that initiative looks more specifically at the packaging side of things to make fiber-based packaging more circular, even more circular in those areas where there is still some way to go. When you look at the households, collections, on-the-go packaging, and so forth, there is still a lot to go, and I come to that also in our policy recommendations linked to the products policy. On the energy side, there's the Energy Solutions Forum. As I said, 60% is based on renewable energy. but then there's still then fossil-based fuels used in the paper industry, and that is looking at practices how to get the energy, the fossil-based energy consumption down. And finally, in that forest-based industry, we are also having our joint vision, not only for the paper and pulp industry, but together with the forest sector and the woodworking and the wood forest-based industry, how to get to the green teal targets in 2050 and the decarbonization roadmap. So I invite you to have a look later. I think we are quite tough on time, so I'd like just to put on the last one. So with the areas of recommendations that we have on the circular economy action plan that link to some of the graphs I've shown before. So first of all, including also that aspect of renewability and prioritize those products that are coming from sustainably sourced materials that have also then are recycled, that those should be prioritized. For that, we need still an optimization of collection systems and a harmonization of the way paper and board is collected throughout Europe, because the recyclability is determining what's happening in the mill, but it needs to come to the mills through a more mainstreamed and harmonized collection system in Europe. And finally, that has been also discussed already on a couple of occasions in these sessions, the product environmental footprint. We are already having a tool for that, for paper companies that use a SME tool using the PEF method to calculate their footprint. It still needs to be improved in our view. So the land use is not yet correctly taken into account, because the sustainable forest management is a bit looked like an agricultural source, while in forestry the creation of wood products is only one of several functions of the forests. And so that needs to be improved, but the paper industry is very dedicated to the PEF and using the PEF tool already to have a more a system to really make products more comparable based on not subjective vision of what criteria need to be taken into the picture and which ones not. With that, thanks a lot for the invitation, and thanks for the attention. Looking forward to the debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leberle, for your remarks. At this stage, it's with pleasure to welcome Mr. Sabadin on behalf of EEB. Mr. Davide Sabadin is working within EEB, the European Environmental Bureau, as a circular economy policy officer, where he works on bridging the gap between circular economy policies and also climate policies to decarbonize industry in the heating sector. Mr. Sabadin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm trying my screen. I hope you will see it. And thanks for having me. I'll try to make the most of my time. EEB is the largest network of environmental citizens organizations, and we are over 160 civil society organizations working on these topics in more than 25 European countries. And we have been doing this for over 40 years. So I will dealing with circular economy and emissions, climate emissions together, as we think we believe that it's the role of circular economy as a driver for environmental and economical policies over the board in Europe is never stressed enough. We think that the European Union has a role worldwide to take up and champion the best practices on circular economy, and specifically because the products we use are becoming the most important issue for climate change. Material production alone can result in the production of 900 billion tons of CO2 equivalents, which is more than what the IPCC foresees as a budget for the whole century. So this is the elephant in the room, and we think that circular economy is the most important instrument we have to use for this. And specifically, you have to target resource use. And I'd like to say that the overall goal of these policies for us is to decouple production and consumption from wealth. We need to produce more value with less products. And to do this, we do not only need more material efficient products, but also an overall material consumption target that stays within the boundaries of the possibilities of our planet, which is not the case today. So we quickly need to take back the Earth Overshoot Day to the 31st of December, as it used to be. So this deals with the fact that the first and foremost concern when we're dealing with raw material should be the one of sustainability of our consumption of such materials, and not the one of competing with other economies worldwide. I was listening to the speakers during the presentation of Raw Material Alliance, and all of the business was about competing with China for raw materials. Well, that is not the business. The business is trying to have an economy that fits within the boundaries of our planet. And this is not really yet there, and not from the industry narrative, and not necessarily overall in the policy making process in Brussels as of today. And so we think that the European Union should have material footprints and environmental footprints target for its product theory to speed up a process where products can achieve their performances with less material use, and thus contributing to the overall cut of the world's resources exploitation. This includes, of course, not only final products, but also semi-products such as steel, chemicals, cement. The Circular Economy Action Plan has already targeted them, but it's really important to come back to this. And then we also think that the European Union should introduce product-specific targets for recycled content, while ensuring that the performance and the safety of the products concerned remain the same. So again, a starting point and no regret option would be, as for instance, steel, cement. Building and construction is a recognized key market to implement circular economy. I like to make a stress on this because some industries, including some industries during this today's conference, have committed to some targets and some roadmaps to tackling emissions and reducing their material use. And notably, the two most important players in Europe for steel committed to carbon neutrality by 2050, partially relying on circular economy. The cement industry has done so far, so have other industries, but largely rely on carbon capture and storage, but also implementing some early circular economy measures at the slow pace that should be improved, speed up. And we know that if we avoid downgrading of steel, which has to do with the scrap and collecting and sorting, among other things, secondary steel production can meet as much as 85% of the EU steel needs. And we also know from cement that different clinkers are being tested from secondary raw materials, and this will result in 20 to 30% CO2 savings, because it cuts on limestone, which is the biggest emitter of CO2 emissions during the process. And then again, we know that if we reuse structural concrete elements, this can lead to 50% reduction in need for new prefabricated concrete elements. These are some figures, some picks from two important studies that in the last 2 years came out about circular economy and climate emissions in these energy-intensive industries. So it's very important to stress that the need to promote high-quality recycling, not just recycling, high-quality loop recycling, and to maintain clean and sustainable closed material loops, particularly for those energy-intensive materials. And So we need to do so, from our perspective, maintaining the same chemical safety requirements for virgin and recycled materials. Because otherwise, we would probably hamper the future recycling of those materials, or this would come to a cost of the health of workers. So policies, of course, can make a difference. We have to regulate the market to drive change. This is already in the narrative and the discussion of the Parliament and the Commission. And we need a carbon footprint of products. That's a needed step for creating the product passport. And product passport is a needed step to create information throughout the value chain. And therefore, we need we need carbon footprints for setting emission targets, so doing the policies around products. And again, this is a key driver for the decarbonization of industry through circular economy. The lack of information through the value chain is indeed a big problem, because we need to make sure that market surveillance authorities and consumers can keep track of the product's environmental impact throughout the value chain. Otherwise, we would not have a market, a driver in the market for such improved products, and these will, in our view, strongly improve secondary raw material markets, enabling urban miners, for instance, and increase the resilience of our economy. Well, and also there's a role of upstream for circular economy. And industry targets to reach 60% alternative fuels, 30% biomass, and 90% alternative fuels in 2050, again with 50% biomass. So there is a role for upstream circular economy. We heard about bioproducts, biorefineries, but we also have to be wary of biomass sourcing. It has to be sustainable, and we also do not wish waste incineration to increase, as it is not complying with the hierarchy in waste. So our main conclusions is that, of course, we need to reduce demand for products by extended lifetime. This is a priority. It's there, and also in the debate within the Parliament. It's not necessarily there in the narrative from the industry. We hear a lot about recycling. We don't hear a lot about rethinking the business model from property ownership to usage, for instance, and having more wealth, more revenues from less product, smaller production. And we all know the largest gains are from the design phase, and but regulatory measures from the market side are needed. And we need closed loop recycling to prevent downgrading of materials. This is a key issue in steel and other metals market. And of course, we have to need to push for research and development in such products such as cement and steel. Overall, these issues should be there in the recovery plans of the member states. They should be prioritized, and this is to avoid stranded assets and to achieve the largest amount of savings as soon as possible, the low-hanging fruit, if you allow me, and to create sustainable, long-lasting jobs. I think the Parliament could help shape the debate in a positive way in order to put circular economy at the forefront of the European economy in the coming years after the COVID crisis, for the sake of making it more resilient and try to bring it on bring it back to the boundaries of the planet resource availability. And we also think that this is a key driver for innovation to keep our companies and industry and services ahead of competition in the world market. Let me say a last word about the fact that we should align such plans, including the circular economy provisions in those plans, with a taxonomy, with a progressive and ambitious taxonomy. And we hope the Parliament will keep an eye on this. I know that's a delegated act, so the Parliament can only either approve it or reject it, as I understand it. But there's a risk that it gets strayed away from the good work that the Parliament did a couple of years ago. And particularly, we worry about the hierarchy of waste again to be expected. We do not welcome the burning of more resources, even if for industrial purposes, to be labeled as a green investment. With this, I conclude, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the intervention, Mr. Sabadins. At this stage, I would just like to inform you that, unfortunately, a last-minute development within the agenda of MEP Mr. Huitema would not allow for his participation to the discussion today. So we can proceed with the reaction of MEP Mr. Radan Kanev. Mr. Kanev is a member of the European Parliament for the EPP group, and inter alia, a substitute member of the Committee on Environment, Public Health, and Food Safety. Mr. Kanev, you have the floor.
Thank you. Do you hear me well?
Yes, very well, thank
you. That's okay. Thank you. So, first of all, I would like to start with a pending question on the economy, because we are living in really tough times, and we are facing even more challenges, especially in the economy ahead. So we inevitably face the main question: is movement towards circular economy a threat for our economy and industry itself? And we shall necessarily find a negative answer. Our answer shall be no. And our circular economy should be a systematic approach to economic development designed to benefit individuals, to benefit businesses, to, at the end of the day, benefit society and, of course, our planet and our environment. In contrast to the take, make, waste linear model we know quite well, the new model should be regenerative by design. Economic activity shall build and rebuild overall system health. It aims to gradually decouple growth from the consumption of original resources. So to put it very simply from this economy point of view, our approach should be less expenses for the governments on the long run, less expenses and less taxes for businesses even today, and above all else, more and better employment, flexible career opportunities, less taxes, better incomes for the workers. As a strategic result, we need better technologies, more competitive industry, and of course, less waste and pollution, better living environment, and better life. Therefore, I would propose a rather unexpected key to this approach. Maybe the key issue are human capital and human resources. Especially bearing in mind, human capital is the basic resource for any technological jump that we obviously need. Should our focus be on human capital, our strategy should encompass early education, vocational training, investment in circular economy, related to higher education, and last not least to science. Next priority should be tax incentives, including where possible, social security and health security incentives for workers, but also income incentives, including job subsidies in the sector, especially when higher qualification is required. And of course, organizing lifelong learning and skills training schemes in a more efficient way. We're all concerned whether circular economy will be competitive enough and provide enough decent jobs. Here, an important additional consideration of circular economy is reference to the International Labour Organization definition of green jobs, of which CE jobs are a subcategory, which focuses on decent work. In estimating circular economy jobs is taking place, particularly everywhere in Europe, among broader concerns about total productivity and wage stagnation. And again, I would propose to this webinar an answer focused on people, on citizens, and on human capital. Circular economy might be extremely, even surprisingly competitive, whereas we grow and educate generations committed to reuse of resources from their early age, committed to less waste and better living conditions. Whereas we put an accent on environment-friendly technologies throughout the education process. That's to say, we train people who are going to easily work in the new circular economy space. We tax less the businesses committed to durability, reuse, remanufacturing, and recycling. We fund both high science and practical innovation. And last not least, we effectively achieve much healthier working and living conditions than any of our international competitors. Thus, on one hand, reducing health costs, providing opportunities for a longer and more decent working life, and maybe most importantly, showing an overall more attractive social model and subsequently motivating our competitors at the end of the day to follow similar path. To put it short and to finish with this, I think the main answer to the question, could circular economy be effective, be competitive, be successful from economy point of view, especially in the very difficult times that we are living now and that we are facing? The answer should be yes, if we prepare as people, as individuals, as societies, as persons. It's very much a human question, and when it's about human questions, it's always about resources put first in education, then in training, in educating mentality, but in educating skills as well. And when it comes to business, making really serious incentives both to innovation and to the circular practice itself, including in the form of tax incentives. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. Thanks to the intergroup, to Maria, and of course to our partners and attendees.
Thank you very much, Mr. Canet, for your intervention. Unfortunately, at this stage, the delay caused in the beginning of the webinar due to some IT issues would not allow for the intervention of Ms. Burkhardt. So we can proceed with the Q&A discussion with the audience. So with reference to that, I would just like to raise a question brought by the attendees that would read out as follows. I think specifically it's targeting the intervention of EIB. It reads out, how could financing for circular economy be further incentivized than currently possible? Would perhaps lower interest rates for investing in more circularity be an example?
Thank you very much for that question. I did not mention that, but the business model of the EIB is to, as a very well-trusted institution, a AAA rated institution, being able to raise capital on capital markets at very good terms, something that we then kind of extend forward to our clients with the markup we need to make ends meet, we can say, as an organization. So that means that the EIB offer really good term loans, even without these particular benefits that could be awarded to circular economy projects. So in a way, I think, in addition to doing that to all clients and also to circular economy clients, I think that the value added that we really try to give and make is to be able to offer financing also to the kind of projects and the kind of promoters which may have difficulties to source and access funding, in particular for the companies with new technical solutions, maybe valorizing new types of waste streams or material streams, but also those venturing into the new sharing, leasing, product as a service business models, which often commercial banks may have difficulties to relate to, basically. So I think that's where we really try to add value and to complement and be additional. And then as a bonus, the EIB loans, both with regard to interest rates and with regard to tenor, are usually quite competitive and quite interesting and beneficial to promoters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on, we have a question for the Committee of the Regions. So the question is, to what extent, when it comes to sustainability and affordability, to what extent do you think that local authorities are actually ready for behavioral change and also to invest in order to make our societies more sustainable? Mr. Stelstra, you have the floor. Mr. Stelstra, if you want to have the floor, I just see that you're on mute. Okay, perhaps we can take meanwhile another question. So if circularity, this is perhaps best addressing all of our speakers today. So if circularity would be prioritized over competitiveness in Europe, then what about shift of production from Europe to outside, particularly when there is no global circular economy action plan? So at this stage, I would just like to invite all speakers to take the floor for their viewpoints. So feel free to open your cameras and for your reaction.
I will take just a few minutes to try to answer this most important question. That's exactly the reason I focused my short statement on competitiveness, because we have to admit our economy generally, and if our effort towards circular economy is not managing to produce a competitive result, it won't be successful at the end of the day. It won't be attractive to others. So again, we won't have this global CE economy effort. Although, of course, we are trying not only in Europe, far from that as a reality. But in order to be successful and to be an example, we have to show it's profitable. We have to show it works. We have to show it leads to technological jumps, to technological innovations, which make production better and at the end of the day, even cheaper. Of course, at the moment when it cannot be cheaper because we have huge investment, we need significant incentives. And apart from the loan criteria, taxonomy criteria for sustainable investment, and low interest profile that other speakers already mentioned much more proficiently than myself, I think we need tax and labor investments as incentives as well.
I see Mr. Sabatin as well has his camera open, so perhaps you'd like to take this question.
Yes, I'd just like to say that when you think of a material footprint and an energy and a carbon footprint for products, we think of products that are present in our market, regardless of where they come from. So to compete in the European market, you have to be as efficient as a European product, so to say. We are one of the largest, if not the largest market still in the world, and producers all over the world look at us as a reference for their products. Therefore, this driving capacity of Europe should be put at its best by competing on environmental and climate innovation, because it is a driver for our economy, for our production and our services. That's a challenge, and that's what we should be trying to achieve with this wealth of public investing that is coming in the next year. We will not have 2 times the chance of having such a magnitude of investments to change our production processes in the next decade. So we better take the most of this, both for the climate and for the resource use.
Thank you very much, Davide. I would just like at this stage to take one final question from the audience. I think best suited also for all of our speakers. And that would be, to what extent do you think that PEF and eco-design so the existing tools are sufficient to make a shift in putting circular products and solutions on the market? Perhaps Mr. Leberle would like to take the floor, or I see Davide once again.
Yes, if no one else is taking the floor, I'd like to say that we totally, as environmentalists, we totally welcome the idea of PEF as a base for targeting green claims. And PEF is not a perfect instrument; it's a limited one, so it's not a solution per se. While the push-pull measures we see in eco-design and energy labeling is surely the way ahead for product policy, is a very important driver. But as PEF is not encompassing everything, we also have to say even the most efficient, material efficient and energy efficient product through eco-design, if multiplied by 3, 4, or 5 times in terms of production, will anyway eventually lead to increased consumption of materials or energy in the end. So we have to keep an eye on overall targets of materials that we use and energy that we use, because those are the boundaries that we have in the system. Therefore, that yes, those tools are necessary, are very important, and it's very good the Commission is targeting those tools for implementation of product policy. But we also have to keep an eye on the overall situation and our impact on the planet.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, so because I spoke a little bit on the PEF as well. So the question is not whether the PEF is the only tool. It's certainly not. So I think it is one building block on the way. But I think it will then be depending on what consequences are drawn from increased transparency about products' footprint in other product related and climate change related policies. But it will increase that transparency, and it will create a clearer basis for taking those decisions, and a clearer basis also for the consumer to make the right choices. So certainly a very important building block, but not sufficient for sure from our perspective.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. Also, just to state that I couldn't agree more within your intervention with the fact that circularity is not also restricted just to recycling. I think that at this stage, if no other speaker would like to take the floor and seeing non-reaction there, I would like to move ahead with the closing remarks. So on behalf of the Secretariat of the Intergroup, I think that, well, this event has been a great opportunity to discuss with EU industry, policymakers and civil society about the opportunities in terms of jobs, competitiveness and growth, alongside positive environmental impact stemming from strategic and circular value chains in Europe. Well, it's also been of great added value to welcome all interventions and best practices towards achieving toward the decarbonization pathways by 2050, but also achieving a circular society and industry. I would like to apologize once again for the technical inconvenience in the beginning of this webinar. Thank you very much, all of our speakers and participants. I don't know if Mr. Kanev would like to take the floor for perhaps some closing remarks as well. With reference to wrapping up this event.
Thank you. I don't feel that confident to wrap up such a thorough discussion, which I followed with great interest, but I don't have the least pretension that I'm an expert on the levels of most speakers here. I was really following the discussion out of interest and out of my motivation of being helpful deeply believing that this is our right path to the future. Of course, based on this experience, I would say that the best follow-up from the discussion for me is that we really listen to the experts, both from real business, science, and civil society, and try to build up a very responsible new industrial policy for all Europe, making our economy at the same time more competitive, more strong, and much more environment friendly. I think that this is the right way toward a better future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanev, for your remarks. Also, thank you very much for your time today, your flexibility, but also your kind patience. Overall, I think I'd also like to take the opportunity to once again thank all of our speakers and participants. While it's been a pleasure having this event with you today, I'm very much looking forward to the ones to follow. So until then, on behalf of the Secretariat of the Intergroup, I'd like to wish you all the best and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.